Right now, though, we do not take a break from talking about Governor Gavin Newsom and his unbelievable executive power grab in the name of the virus. Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, joins us now. Tom is in Washington, D.C., like I am, and he spends more time focusing on the travails of California, it seems, than people who are living in California, sadly. Tom, thanks for joining us.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, Larry.
I'm so glad Judicial Watch is doing this. You have put out a temporary injunction now, where you're applying for a temporary injunction against the governor because he wants to give tens of millions of dollars to illegal aliens. Tell me about this. How can you legally stop him?
Well, the law doesn't allow you to give these types of cash benefits to illegal aliens. If a state wants to do something like that, the legislature has got to pass a law specifically. And that's not what happened with Governor Newsom. He just did it on his own and took $75 million in taxpayer money and is going to dole it out through third-party groups. And it's not appropriate. It's not lawful when we're representing taxpayers. Unfortunately, our request for a temporary restraining order was denied just a little bit ago by a California Superior Court judge, so we're considering our next steps. I know there's another lawsuit challenging it as well. I think it's now before the California Supreme Court. So there's got to be some reckoning with the rule of law here. You know, it's one thing to recognize as an emergency with coronavirus, but it doesn't mean the law collapses. And the law doesn't allow the governor of any state just to dole out money to illegal aliens as he sees fit. And this lawlessness has got to stop, and that's why we're taking a stand for it in California. You know, because after all, California's a pretty important place, even though it's not Washington. You know, you know Washington as well as anyone else. You know, if it doesn't happen out in Washington, people don't care about it here. But we got to understand California is a leader in the country in terms of bad policy and lawlessness in terms of government activity and power, and that's why we're standing up against it with this new lawsuit.
It's the corruption of one-party rule. You know, Governor Newsom thinks that he can pretty much do anything because the one thing a politician fears, Tom Fitton, other than Judicial Watch coming after them, is losing their power and losing an election. And sadly, Democrats who have their little power base in Sacramento, they don't have that fear. They never think they're going to lose an election because, well, frankly, that's sort of the way things have been working in the state of California. And I appreciate you pushing back against it. First of all, I didn't know that there was that the judge had ruled on this. That's kind of breaking. When did he come down and reject the temporary restraining order?
As far as I can tell, it was just a few minutes ago. So I just got to know.
All right, but you haven't been able to see what the rationale or reasoning was behind that yet?
No, I have no report as to what happened in the hearing other than we didn't get what we wanted initially. So we'll see. Maybe we can appeal. Either way, the lawsuit will continue.
Can you shed a little light for people who are, because anyone tuning in and hearing saying, hold on a second, the governor, without consulting the state legislature, without consulting the state senate, without anything being passed through the proper channels and signed into law, because this is an appropriation of state funds, right? How does the governor, under his executive authority, just decide to write a blank check? And by the way, this will be a blank check, because he claims there are only 150,000 who will claim their $500, these illegal aliens. But what if 151,000 show up? They're going to turn them away? This could go on and on. Tom, under what authority did he make this decision?
Well, he doesn't have any authority. Yeah, so I mean, I don't have an easy answer for you. That's why we're suing. I mean, it's completely lawless. And if the legislature wants to do this, assuming it can under other laws, then they need to take the steps appropriate. In this case, you just have the governor just spending money on his own without any authority. We'll see if the courts are willing to put a stop to it. This lower court judge initially didn't want to issue a TRO, but it doesn't necessarily mean the issue is dead. We're going to keep on pushing on it.
You know, Tom, also, you're also pushing to get the state of California to clean up their voter rolls, and
Right.
You've had some success there working with LA County, but this is even more heightened now as we look at so many Democrats, and it is almost exclusively Democrats, openly talking about having a completely mailed-in election in November. What is the progress there, and how were you able, through Judicial Watch, to be able to get California in some way to clean up their act prior to this election?
Well, we sued. We sued in California. We sued the state of California and L.A. County specifically because their rolls were such a mess, and they settled and have undertaken a process which could remove up to 1.6 million names from the rolls. And these are what they call inactive names. They're still registered to vote, but they're just calling them inactive to excuse their refusal to clean up the list. So that process is going to take some time. So what we're highlighting there, though, is that the rolls aren't clean. And when you have dirty election rolls, you can have dirty elections. And the concern is, to the degree they're pushing this really radical mail-in ballot process that would greatly expand it, are they going to be mailing to these inactive voters? And if so, that's a recipe for voter fraud, beyond the general concern of turning our election system over to the U.S. Postal Service.
Yeah, which is a whole other conversation. Tom Fitton is with us. He's the president of Judicial Watch. And Tom, if I could shift gears from California now and focus on some things that have happened in the last week or so in Washington, D.C., you've always been one of my go-to guests to sort of explain, shed light on, and also talk about what Judicial Watch has been able to achieve with regard to the story of General Michael Flynn and the illegally obtained FISA warrants under James Comey against Carter Page and spying on the Trump campaign. I'd love for you to reflect a little bit on what we've learned now about the FBI's conduct under James Comey with regard to the General Flynn case itself. Give us a quick summary. We did have Sidney Powell on last week to give us a summary as well, but bring our listeners up to speed on what we've learned and what it tells you in terms of what the FBI was really up to.
Well, it was a terribly corrupt act and prosecution and investigation of General Flynn. Look, it began not at the time he was interviewed. It began during the campaign. They began a spy operation on Flynn and the Trump campaign. And even after abusing their authority to spy on Flynn based on the flimsiest of reasons, in January of 2017, the FBI put out a memo, said they were calling it Operation Razor, I think. And they said there's nothing there. We don't have a viable case. And the new documents the FBI just coughed up after hiding them for years show that Peter Strzok, at the orders, it looks like, of the leadership of the FBI, intervened to keep the case open. And, of course, that led to the ambush interview, the entrapment of Flynn at the White House with basically bad faith questions about his conversations with the Russia ambassador, foreign minister. They had no basis to go in and ask him questions about anything related to his duties and responsibilities as incoming national security advisor. But they bypassed the rules, they bypassed the law, and they violated his rights, and they coerced him into a plea agreement that he's now since withdrawn and repudiated. And we'll see what the court does. If I were the court, I'd be instituting criminal proceedings against the FBI for hiding these documents from the court and General Flynn's defense team. And I don't know what the Justice Department is doing. I don't even know why this case is still alive. It doesn't speak well of Attorney General Barr's management of the agency or the FBI, that nothing serious has been done despite all this evidence popping into the public domain.
I want to get to that in a second, because you're absolutely right. Where is Christopher Wray? Where is Attorney General Barr on this? Except that Attorney General Barr is at least conducting some kind of overview that might lead to criminal charges. Maybe he doesn't want to get in the way of that. But still, we've got an innocent man here who is facing these charges still, and he shouldn't. But I want to go back. You just said the FBI, when they approached General Flynn in the White House in late January, as he was just installed a week prior as National Security Advisor, they asked him bad faith questions. Let's drill down on that. The questioning that apparently, that they claim General Flynn lied about, had to do with a phone call he had with the Russian ambassador when he was still the incoming National Security Advisor. He didn't actually, it was during December, I think, when it was a transition time. The FBI already knew what happened in that phone call because it was recorded. They had transcripts. In fact, their claim that he lied is because they compared his answers to the transcripts. So that sort of exposes the original sin here, Tom, doesn't it? That there was no reason to ask him what happened on the phone call because they already knew what happened on the phone call.
Yeah, of course they knew what happened on the phone call. And, of course, he didn't lie. I mean, my understanding of the conversation was he wasn't sure about what he said, and he was kind of responding based on his memory. Remember, they came in, surprised him with the questions, and they didn't give him any warning that they were investigating him. And so he was like, this is what I think I said or whatever. Of course, we don't have the original 302 report because it disappeared somewhere. The 302 is the narrative report the FBI makes of interviews with witnesses and subjects, which is another whole mess because the FBI has these 302 reports and they don't record conversations and witness interviews. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Why in this day and age don't they record the interviews?
Yeah,
and this is why, because they want to be able to screw a witness or a subject based on their word alone. And when you got people like Peter Strzok doing it, this is what happens.
You know, as we talk about the reforms that are needed in the Justice Department at the FBI, this is a great line of questioning here, Tom Fitton. Why don't they record interviews with people? And because every other law enforcement agency at the state level, county level, city level, they record the interviews that they have for the most part. That seems like a basic, I would think, because it makes it way too easy for them to say, he lied to us because he said this. And then it becomes a he said, or he said, she said thing. And when an FBI agent goes into court and testifies and said, yep, that's what he told me, usually the jury's going to believe the FBI agent.
The FBI thinks it's above the law. It's fundamentally broken. I don't know how much more evidence we need. There's this distinction between the leadership and the rest of the agency. That's a distinction without a difference. I mean, many of the agents know what's going on in the FBI. The good ones often leave as soon as they're able because they see the inherent corruption and the kind of the politicized nature of the FBI bureaucracy. I mean, we're supposed to believe that of all the giant government bureaucracies here in Washington, D.C., that we're all supposed to be skeptical of, the FBI, no, don't worry about that.
Right.
They're just like any other government bureaucracy, and it's as a sick institution. And unfortunately, Director Wray has been involved and allowing the cover-up to continue. I've been highlighting the fact these Page-Strzok emails that have come out in the Flynn prosecution, we've been asking for them for 2 years. And we've been getting emails once a month, more or less. They've been slow-walking the release of the documents. They got 8,000 Page-Strzok emails. They're still, quote, looking at. And we won't get them all until the middle or at least the end of next year. And those are the ones we get as opposed to the ones they withhold, which are thousands. It's incredibly duplicitous what the Wray is doing in terms of pretending to be concerned about FBI reform while hiding evidence of FBI corruption.
Well, and let's finish it up with that. Where is Christopher Wray? This has happened, all of these documents, all of the things that we're learning thanks to Sidney Powell's efforts in defending General Flynn, it's all been revealed now, but Christopher Wray has been the FBI director for, over 3 years now. This is an indictment of his leadership, is it not? And shouldn't there be something done about that?
Well, we just have to hold them accountable. Look, my chief concern is getting the records and making sure nothing's been destroyed. And if records start turning up showing government misconduct or agency misconduct, where's this criminal investigation that's supposed to be looking into all of this?
Yeah.
If you were a private entity, Larry, and you just start divulging records years after you've been asked about them, what do you think law enforcement do? They go to your house and take your computer servers. They do raids like they did on Stone and Manafort. If I were the Justice Department or a special counsel, frankly, outside the Justice Department, I would have separate law enforcement officers at the federal level go and secure FBI documents. I don't trust the agency leadership at all to secure or turn over documents that make the agency or its people look bad.
We keep hearing, Tom Fitton, that yes, it's the leadership, but it's not the regular, shoe leather special agents who work for the FBI on a day-to-day basis, and I have no reason to believe that that's true. But at some point, we have to step back and say, where are the whistleblowers? Where are all the good FBI agents who were blowing the whistle on these bad apples? And that does lead us back to Mr. Wray, the FBI director. If it truly is just a few bad apples, then make an example of those few bad apples. And let the rest of the country know, let the citizens know that this will not be tolerated. This is criminal behavior. And that hasn't happened. Not even close, sir.
No, it hasn't. I mean, we've had evidence that the FISA warrant process is completely broken. The FBI was gaming the system and gaming courts, obstructing justice. Nothing the FBI has said since that's been exposed suggests they take it seriously. The other concern I have is the courts don't seem to take it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, in my view, obstruction of justice and criminal contempt of courts. If I were Judge Sullivan, I'd be instituting criminal contempt proceedings against the persecutors of General Flynn. On the FISA side, what is the FISA court going to do? The court's asking some questions about whether, how, and why it was lied to. But, like I said, if it were a regular litigant or a lawyer doing this sort of gamesmanship, they'd be facing jail time or criminal contempt of court, and that's not happening. And if I were the Justice Department, I'd offer myself for criminal contempt proceedings to make sure the agency and those responsible are held responsible. And that's not happening here. And I'm seeing any evidence, frankly, that Durham is doing the type of criminal investigation that's going to lead to serious charges against the people chiefly responsible. I'm just not seeing the evidence. Maybe there'll be evidence tomorrow, and I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm waiting for the evidence that something good is going to happen in terms of accountability. And that's why Judicial Watch just keeps on doing its own work, because we just don't rely on these agencies to do the right thing. They have to be pushed, or otherwise, separately, we have to do and figure out what went on.
Now, the real oversight in Washington, D.C. does not come from the House Oversight Committee. It comes from Judicial Watch and Tom Fitton. Whether it's Washington or whether it's the state of California and Sacramento, he is constantly trying to hold our elected officials accountable for their actions. And I appreciate you joining us as always, Tom. The family is good. Everything's fine through the coronavirus thing.
Well, we're surviving.
You're
still
suddenly
being
homeschooling. A whole house of girls there that you're homeschooling now. Are you enjoying that?
Yeah. Well, I'm waiting for the mayor to open up our nation's capital and let the people get back to work. They just hired Susan Rice as co-chair to reopen D.C., so the corrupt Obama gang is now running the city completely, it looks like.
I'm sure they'll do everything by the book, right? It'll all be by the book. All right, Tom, hang in there. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Larry. Yep.
Again, it's judicialwatch.org. Judicialwatch.org. Contribute and make sure that Tom and that group can continue doing the great work that they do.